This is Call with Dads, where we dive into the ups, downs, and everything in between when it comes to being a dad. Here, it's all about connecting with a community of dads who are committed to learning and leveling up as fathers. Welcome to Call with Dads. Let's talk.
So let's do this. Speaking about fear, to me, that's a great intro to this because
Okay, yeah.
different kind of fear, but still fear nonetheless. So
Getting jacked off by somebody overseas?
I don't. Overseas is different than here in America. So for anyone listening overseas, go enjoy your haircuts however you want. But that being said, here, for at least the three of us, you know, the funny thing is for fear of, as for a lot of fathers and such, you know, we've mentioned before, like when I think I've mentioned it at least once, I've said it a time or two that as a dad, I didn't realize that a father really doesn't know what they're doing. We're all making it up as we go. And, you know, like my stepdad, for an example, when he said something, when he did something, I thought, well, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's saying. He knows this isn't his first rodeo, blah, 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 right? It never dawned on me that I was completely different than his kids. And because of that, dealing with me was different than dealing with how his kids were. So it was a complete new thing that he had to figure out dealing with, especially as a stepdad. And then all this. And growing up, you just kind of expect your dad, your parents always know, have the answer. And man, it is so easy just to screw up and say the wrong thing. Like, I kid you not, I can tell you there's a lot of times that, like, I know personally, I was saying this morning about my son saying, sit down, stop whining. I know I'm not supposed to say, stop whining. I'm supposed to be calm yourself down, take a breath. Let's figure out what's bothering you. Yeah.
Stop pulling your sister's hair.
Sadly enough, I have said that this morning already. But in all truth, it's the whole, you have to know, we try to do our best, but there's always that fear of really screwing up, messing up horribly, making our kids go out in the world, painting their hair blue and believing that there's 1,000 genders. I mean, there's all things we can do to mess our kids up. But personally, I constantly am trying to tell my kids stuff, and my son more now because I'm constantly explaining to him, this is why I'm doing this. But there's times, buddy, I can't explain it to you because you're not old enough to understand yet.
Right.
And I've heard people sit there like, people talk about, oh, well, you quit drinking completely, never touch the stuff because you don't want your kids to smell alcohol on your breath. Well, that's stupid. And forgive me if you're addicted and you're drinking, like I've had buddies that they would drink like a fish every night. I think a fish would probably be drunk before they did. You know what I mean? But it's the whole thing of, if you're not getting drunk, having a beer, showing your kids, like for an example, my stepdad, his dad, my step grandpa, used to have a thing where he wanted to get every one of his kids and every one of his grandkids drunk with him before they got drunk with anyone else. I still remember that hangover. Now, here's the thing is, as far as I've known, none of the kids that he raised has an alcoholic problem. They would drink wine occasionally. My stepdad, I think I would see him take like a small glass, maybe this big of wine. But other than that, I've really never seen him drink. I imagine when he was in the military, he drank heavily, but
I can attest to that. So, sorry.
But it's a whole thing of, you can't try, I my mind is when you say don't drink in front of your kids, it's that whole hiding what you do, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's a mistake, but to other people, having a beer around your kids is a mistake. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Well, I
what's your
think
gut?
it's kind of a lot of the idea behind that concept is more so like control, teaching your children the benefit of control, understanding how to, you know, I guess be conservative in a lot of those things. I don't mean conservative like Republican,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. I mean conservative in your values and how you manage things. You know what I mean? It's simple tasks like if you shouldn't avoid getting in a fight or an argument with your spouse in front of your kids. You shouldn't avoid it. You should sometimes it should be okay. It's going to happen, but what you should do is, work together to solve the issue in front of your children. That way they see that arguments do happen amongst adults. That's a thing. It's going to happen. It will always happen. But as two consenting adults, acted like adults in the situation, came to an agreement, worked together, and moved forward as a loving couple and a happy family. You know what I mean? It's the same concept with drinking. You should drink, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But you should also choose to have one and then two. There are
Yeah, I mean,
some
those
things like smoking crack. Obviously, just don't do that. But
it's just a little heroin, sweetheart.
With the crack
it's
again,
just a
huh?
heroin. As long as I only do once a day.
Well, with
There are lines and extremes, obviously.
So with the fights though too, I mean, I feel like it's a common misunderstanding. Like you said, it all spawns from that fear of messing up. It's like you don't want to have fights in front of your kids because you're afraid that they're going to grow up to be hooligans, or I don't know, whatever you're afraid of, right? As a result of them witnessing a fight between their parents. But at the end of the day, you're actually robbing them of an opportunity to see two adults work through a problem. And now it would be different if you're like throwing shit and yelling and screaming and cussing, and you know what I mean? Like that's a different situation. Like obviously you don't want your kids to see that, but it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate to them what emotional control looks like, what negotiation looks like, what an attempt to understand another person's viewpoint looks like. How to handle dispute in a long-term relationship. There's an opportunity for them to learn all these skills, but when you're constantly hiding that behind closed doors, you're robbing them of that opportunity, and they're going to grow up thinking that everything's sunshine and rainbows, and the first time that they have a dispute with their spouse, everything's going to fall apart. I mean, it's the reason we've got divorce culture. One of the reasons
I'm the first one to admit I am the worst at emotional control and stuff like that. I'm the worst at it. You know what I mean? I deal with, a lot of PTSD and stuff like that, and anger issues from my past and my family, and then went into the military and got fucking PTSD on top of it. So it's like, bam, bam, stack it up. Just make yourself nuts. So now, one of the things that I have trouble with in front of my kid is emotional control. It is something that I have actually been working on for 6 years, the entire life of that daughter. But it's like you said, the moment, it's like we said in other episodes, the moment she popped out, it was like world changed. So it's something that I'm learning to control. You know what I mean? But it's definitely something that she sees, because she adopts the behavior, because as though she adopts the over emotional behavior that myself sometimes showed her over the years, which she has kind of, but she also adopts the, watching me learn to control it. So she has adopted that as well. And I can see that. I actually seen that today. Yesterday and today combined. So, short story, yesterday, she went to school, and she likes to pretend, because she likes the trolls, the Poppy and the weird little trolls from the, so she likes to pretend sometimes to kind of see where she can get away with things. She'll do something wrong and she'll be like, "Oh, Poppy did it," and like. So we're working through that and learning how to handle it. Well, she went to school to test waters one time. She now is on her best behavior at school all the time. She's never in trouble. She tested the waters yesterday, and to see where she was. So she called, they were having like playtime or whatever, and she says, "Excuse me, everyone." Their classes are like 8 people. It's a special school, like we've said before. So she, "Excuse me, everyone. My friend Poppy says she doesn't like God," in front of everybody. So it was kind of, she knows it's wrong, but she wanted to test the waters, especially since it's a Christian school. She wanted to test and see what she can get away with, and see if she can get away with it for blaming it on Poppy. She immediately got pulled aside. She didn't get in trouble, but she immediately got pulled aside, somewhat embarrassed in front of the class, and then talked to by the teacher. And she was quiet the rest of the day. She come home. She was very grumpy, angry, hitting. She had hit me, punched me in the face, and kicked me in the side multiple times just because she was lashing out, because she didn't know how to handle it at school. So she comes home and lets it go at home. Well, in that process, I control myself. My wife controls herself. We haven't addressed it yet, and we don't plan to for a little bit. We wait, we let it play out. We let her kind of absorb it. And over time, she calms herself down. She learns to kind of get her mind off of it. And as she calmed herself down, she stopped hitting. She went in timeout a couple times for hitting and stuff like that. And then once it was all said and done, later in the evening, my wife talked to her, and she, as soon as it was brought up again, she immediately mad again, because she didn't know she doesn't understand the feeling that she's feeling, more so embarrassment for what she did. So in that process, we talked to her about it, let her know it was a mistake. It's okay. We need, and we explained the whole thing about not, blaming things on others and trying to get away with things, so on and so forth. And we went through all that stuff. But after talking to her about it and her working on she actually worked on her own emotions. She calmed down. She was like, "I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad." And she would give us hugs and kisses, and it was over. So it is there that the children, watch you and learn from your behavior. You know what I mean? So that was a big thing that happened yesterday. It's pretty interesting. So me personally, here, I'll end the entire episode right now. We'll just 2-minute episode. The only way you're going to fail as a parent is by not being a parent. If you're not there, it's the only way. Just don't be there, and you'll fail.
Presence is really one of them, and statistically that seems to be true too.
Yeah,
we don't, when we measure fatherless homes, we don't gauge the homes against that. We don't gauge the quality of the father against the fatherless homes, right? We just know that amongst fatherless homes,
they even say a bad father in the home is better than no father.
Right. And then that goes back to that whole. I was actually told this a long time ago by he wasn't really a mentor of mine. He was a gentleman that I worked with when I was very young. And he made a comment to me about fathers, and he said, pretty much every, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, pretty much every parent's going to screw their kids up one way or another.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you just can't help it. Like you're spending, 18 years of that person's most influential period of their life, helping them to grow, and you're responsible for their well-being and their care. And you're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, you kind of just have to prepare them for the world and hope, and let's be honest, even a 30, 40, 50-year-old still figuring out. None of us really know, so it's like, it's just, it's certainly a fear that every father faces, and it's difficult to overcome. But at the end of the day, I think you just kind of need to rest assured, understanding that you're gonna make mistakes, and you just, as long as you're trying, you're probably doing better than 90% of the rest of the fathers on the planet anyway. So it's
for sure. And it's evidence that nobody's figured it out, and you never will. We're literally on a podcast with 3 experienced dads, and we bring on several very experienced and multiple people that have 30, 40 years of being parents and stuff like that, and raised 3 and 4 kids, and they still haven't figured it out. None of us have.
I'll end the podcast a second time. If you're here listening to this podcast, then you're probably doing better than most fathers are doing. You know what I mean? Because you actually are concerned about getting better. You actually care about learning and becoming better, and that's better than most. So
and our advice always isn't perfect, but we're just sharing our experiences, what we have learned. And that's why we bring on guests to learn and ask and find out, all these different ideas, especially different ideas from people that don't agree with us. We've had that one guy on, with the gentle parenting shenanigans, which I still believe is absolute nonsense, but it's a different point of view. We want to give everybody that option. So learning is never ending. It's never ending. And that fear of not doing it right, it will never end. It'll be there forever pretty much. So
what do you think, Eric?
To me, it's kind of a twist of, there's several lessons and levels of screwing up, basically. The most biggest one is walking out of the kids. Obviously, you do that, you just failed and you're not even trying. We've cleared that up. But then it comes to the fact of dads like us, dads that are trying our best to do what we can, that are trying to find answers where we can. We're trying to do whatever it takes, and the fear of like yelling, losing our temper, not having our own emotions straight, it's like doing a business almost. Is you step out there, you put yourself out there. Like, look at HomeServe, that homeschooling thing that I was attempting, failed miserably. I mean, honestly, it failed, and it didn't get any tractions, and it was a painful thing to do because I put a lot of effort. I pushed a lot of other things aside, and we have that same fear of what if that happens with our kids. Now, the difference between a business that you start up and say, a lot of businesses are either dead from the first 3 years. A kid, you don't have that stretch of the year or 3 years. It's an 18-year process. And you can adjust a little bit here and a little bit there. It's kind of like how I look at homeschooling, and I know I'm mixing metaphors here, but the fact is like with my son,
a metaphor.
Exactly. With my son, he's horrid at math. He's a bad Asian. We've come to that conclusion.
You bad Asian.
He got your math genes.
He really did. But the thing is it's the fact that we tried this online classroom thing, and I think I spend more time working with him on his homework and teaching him how to do stuff than he does through the class. But the nice thing is we tried this for a year. I don't know if it's fully working. So with the summer break, we can course adjust and try something different, and if that helps him, then fantastic. It's an AI math tutor. And,
that's cool.
I actually heard the owner on another dad podcast talk about it. It's called Synthesis or something like that, I think. I'll have to look again, but we're giving it a try. Yeah. It's supposed to be AI driven, very knowledgeable, put entertainment in, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the fact is I honestly sit there and fear, okay, because math is obviously not my strongest suit. I am thankful for calculators. I can do a lot of basic math in my head, the multiplication, division, things like that, Obviously better than a lot of cashiers that you go to or baristas when you say, here's my money, the change should be this. And they say, well, I have to wait for the machine to tell me. You know what I mean? So,
Mm.
but I don't want my kids waiting for a machine to tell them the answer. I want them to have the fortitude of mind width to say, okay, I know if
Yeah,
I
the
figure this
ability,
out, blah, blah, blah. Now,
ability, just bring it there. Yeah.
right. But now here's the thing is I have the fear of, am I screwing them up by walking or putting this AI, putting in front of computer more for educational purposes? Because that's really what I'm doing, right? Putting them in front of another screen to work on learning a subject, or do I sit down and, because I know a textbook he's not going to do, you know what I mean? So I have to balance it all out. That's what it comes down to, is the fear of what are we doing and how can we avoid doing this? Like you said, with your daughter, you give time out, you let her cool down, you
Yeah.
try to not let your emotions go rampant. And it's hard to do at times, because I know, like, I'll be sitting there trying to cook dinner, give the kids a bath, all this, because with me working from home, as you can
Yeah.
see, cat behind me, you don't have a cat in an office normally, but
No cat here.
but the general gist is that we have so many different ways of, as parents, a little mistake can be course adjusted. Now, if you're beating the daylights out of your kids, then that's a major fail as well. But
Right. Yeah.
and
Right.
but
Yeah.
the fact is you don't let your emotions get the best of you and run rampant. With that, it's
Try not to. Try not
yeah.
to.
I mean, and I can tell you, like I said, for me,
Yeah, we all have those moments.
yeah,
Yeah. I
and
will say, one of the things. So with all that like disciplinary stuff, that was one of my major fears. You know what I mean? Because my stepdad, he was not abusive, but he was very, very strict. And he, like, it was a once and that was it. He said, don't do that. That was it. I don't know. He must have had like a memory like an elephant. He could remember everything
I
because
mean, that
even
can be
if
a
it was
good thing and a
five
bad
years
thing.
later,
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
If it was 5 years later and I did that one thing he told me not to do 5 years ago, he didn't even say, what did I say? Don't do that. I told you a long time ago. He never said that. He would just immediately be like, and that was it. It was the end of it.
jeez,
Yeah, it was literally, even if it was 5 years later, and I did that one thing he told me 5 years ago not to do, and then he'd be like,
jeez.
I said, don't do that, unless you want another one. And that was the end. That was how it
She'd be
went.
like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you did say
Yeah,
that."
yeah, right. So when I have my kid, you know, I see that and I understand, as bad as it was, it works. It
The
does.
consistency
Right.
is,
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no shit. It worked. You know what I mean? If my step in, and it wasn't that it worked because he hit me the next time. It worked because from that point forward, when I saw that happen 2 or 3 times at a very young age, from that point forward, whenever my stepdad said, I need you to do this and do it right now. Yes, sir. That was it. I did it. Yes, sir. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And don't do this. Yes, sir. And I never did it. You know what I mean? I was very behaved from a certain age on. Obviously teenage years come into play and boners start happening. So, what do you expect? You start doing silly things because your hormones go a little nuts. But I
Right.
I mean,
still,
he made
took
mistakes, but
into
he
play
never
that.
wavered. That's what it
Right.
was.
He
It
Right.
never
was the
wavered.
consistent. It was his
Right.
presence, his consistency.
hmm
Yeah.
And even in my times of making mistakes at a young age, I still respected him. I still did what he said, and I still behaved. Granted, I made a lot more mistakes, but I was a teenager. So
Yeah.
I look at that today, and I go, am I making a mistake by not whooping my daughter's ass whenever she does something wrong, and I tell her 6 times to stop? But then I look at it and I go, my daughter isn't me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's a girl. You know, B, by the time I was with my stepdad, I was probably about 10 years old when I started living with him. You know, so it
Different
was a little bit,
situation. Yeah.
right, a little bit older. You know, it's a different year. You know, I mean, I was like I am now. Even my grandmother says, it doesn't matter what happens to you, Eric. It's like somebody could beat you to death, cut your arms off, and throw you in the middle of the desert, and you would come back home somehow alive with both of your arms. I don't know how, but for some reason, you are like an insane person and lived through anything. And I was like, yeah. So even my grandmother says I'm nuts, and I'm assuming that was just how it was taken into account. You know what I mean? As I was younger, because for some reason my stepdad always knew how to handle me differently versus my brother, differently versus my sister. He just knew. I don't know why, but he did, and that's
So this,
where I look at it as a mistake that I'm making because I've spanked my daughter a couple of times when she was a little bit younger, and boy, did it just make it worse. She is
really.
not the spanking type. You cannot spank her. It just makes it worse. Doesn't matter. You know,
So
hmm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good.
So this is gonna kind of like this will be my nerd flag, so in case anybody listening didn't know that I was a total nerd. But I've always remembered this. There's a show called Stargate, and
Yeah.
well, it's one of my favorite shows when I was growing up. And so there's this like really old. I don't want to get too far into it, but there's a really old race of aliens, and they're talking to one of the human characters, and he says this line. He says, "The very young do not always do as they're told." And I just remember thinking about that, like, and it's stuck with me. I mean, this has been a decade or more, you know, and I
Right.
still think of that line, like, and it's kind of like, it's like my mantra sometimes with my kids, you know, because my kids will just do the stupidest shit,
Yeah.
and they'll do it. It'll be like the fourth time, you know, and I'm like,
Yeah.
like really, you know what I mean? Like you didn't learn the first three, you know, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, the very young do not always do as they're told, you know, and it's just such a good like line to remember as a father.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this is like on another note, but like I have this theory or this like idea as to what constitutes like the 4 stages of manhood, and I'll briefly cover it. I have a whole post about it on my X. It actually did really well. But so there's the first stage is boyhood, when you have no responsibility. Your parents are entirely responsible for your well-being. You move into the next stage, which is kind of the beginning of manhood, and you kind of, you know, cut ties, you leave the protection of your family home, and you become responsible for caring for yourself. And so each one of these stages involves kind of like taking more responsibility, right? Or like putting more weight on your shoulders. So the beginning of manhood, you take responsibility for yourself. The second stage is when you get married and you take on care or responsibility for another person. But the unique aspect of the third stage is that individual is capable of taking care of themselves if you were to screw up royally, right? So if you are a horrible husband, your wife can go off, and as an adult, she can still take care of herself. And then the final stage is when you have a child and you take on care and responsibility for another person. But the difference is that other person is not capable of taking care of themselves, right?
Yeah.
So if you screw up, it's detrimental to them for the remainder of their life, right?
Right.
And so it's interesting because each one of those, I just thought about this kind of, each one of those stages of development, when they're like another step in your growth as a man. So in a way, when you have a kid, your kid, an aspect of what your child is they're an instrument for your growth and development. And I know that sounds terrible, but it is what it is. You know, I mean, in exchange, they get life, right? they get protection. They get provided for. They get taught and mentored, and they have an opportunity to go off and be, a person on their own. But in a way, it's kind of a price they pay. Is they, in a way, they're the instrument for your growth and development.
Yeah.
And so they're necessarily, just like any tool, they're going to get kind of beaten and battered a little bit along the way. Yeah. You know what I mean?
There's a guy I heard he said something about a man will reinvent himself at least 3 times in the course of his life. That kind of lines up, because you're not reinventing yourself in stage one. Stage one, you are. and then stage 2, reinvent, stage 3, reinvent, stage 4, reinvent, right? So you reinvent yourself
that's true.
times.
Yeah,
so
you're not reinventing in stage 1, you're inventing.
Right.
Yeah.
Stage 1,
Yeah.
you are, you're invented by somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
So it kind of lines up, and it makes sense, and it does hold true. You know what I mean? I remember going out on my own. It was weird. I went and lived in a crappy apartment in the middle of Fort Lauderdale. Worked for a crane company, barely paid my bills, and did cocaine and hookers. So it was a horrible life, but I was learning my way. You know what I mean?
But you were only responsible for yourself, so you could screw up as much as you wanted to, and the only person that paid was you.
Was me, right? And that's right. I eventually, in that process, decided that this wasn't for me. That's where I joined the military and moved on. And somewhere throughout the course of the military, I met my wife. And even when I was in the military, I was still doing the same things that I was doing. I just wasn't blowing cocaine. You know what I mean? I was just drinking and partying and banging hookers and doing stupid stuff. But I met my wife. Completely reinvented. And I mean,
it changes everything.
Right. We didn't have kids for, a couple of years, and not to mention in that process, while we were dating, I moved to Korea, and I lived in Korea for a year. She stayed back in South Carolina, because it wasn't a deployment, but it was like a deployment because significant others weren't allowed to come. So it was basically like it was a PCS to Korea, but they can't come. There are certain ones that can, different parts of the country. I think if you go weird, but if you go to the northern bases, the bases up by the DMZ, you're allowed to bring your family, which doesn't make any sense. But okay, but I was down in the south end of the country, which would make total sense to have your family because they're far away from bad guys, right? But I didn't mind. I went to Korea, and in the process of being in Korea, it was like a breeding ground for boozing, banging Korean hookers, and doing all that stuff. And because
you're
I
living
met
in a
my
fantasy
wife,
world,
right? Yeah, it really is. And I completely totally I was 100% faithful the entire time. All my friends used to make fun of me. All the people that I worked with used to pick on me and say, "You're an idiot. Why are you doing that?"
Everybody does it.
Right. There's a bunch of juicy girls over there. Go fucking. And the weird thing is, it's in America, I don't know, you just using general ideology based on watching like TV and movies and Google and shenanigans. I couldn't imagine a hooker being anything less than $100, if not more, in the United States. Right? When I was in Korea, it was like $5. Yeah, seriously. Like I remember all my buddies. Yeah. They would go and get 3 or 4 in a night and be like, I only spent $20. Then they would go booze all night. And I was like, geez, man. So that in itself showed I met her and it was a total different world. And I was faithful the whole time. You know what I mean? And then I come back and then we had a kid, and that's when I was like, I need to be better, because I was still kind of a shitty person. I was just more so faithful, a little bit more honorable, so I essentially reinvented myself into more of an adult, and then eventually had a kid, and it was like, all right, now I'm a man. It was totally separate.
But you're a testament to that. I'm sure we're all three of us can testify to the fact that, that's like a life-changing experience, is reaching that third stage, where you find the woman that you will one day be your wife. And I feel like society discourages that. We talk all about, you gotta, even the idea of you gotta sow your wild oats, you gotta go. It's all bullshit, man. It's all bullshit. There's none of that matters. It doesn't enrich you at all. You know what I mean? That second stage is not an opportunity for you to experience life. No, man. Life comes along the way. You know what I mean? Life's not hookers and blow. You know what I mean? That's not life. Sure. And we discourage that. And so it's you find that woman that will one day be your wife, and then it's we've got red flag culture, right? And we've got all these other things where it's she fucking culture. I saw her pick her nose. You know what I mean? She can't be the one. That's disgusting. She can't be the one. It's something stupid, but we encourage these young people to look for red flags. You know what I mean? And it just it's like we're just constantly discouraging people from taking this leap into that next stage.
Yeah.
It was particularly men.
And meeting women and looking for women in certain places and with certain ideologies, as well as at a young age. That is discouraged. Like that was something that was discouraged to me, was meeting and getting married at a young age. I always thought, I need to travel, party, bang a bunch of bitches, and then that way when I meet my wife, I'm experienced and I can satisfy her. And that's actually 100% incorrect, because
I mean, it's taboo. It's taboo to even think about marriage. You know what I mean? Like you go into a relationship and it's like, if I were to sit down on date 3 with, as a young man with a woman and, be like, well, what do you want out of your life? Well, I want a family. I want to get married. I want to have kids. That's why I'm here. I'm here to find a future wife. That's right. What is that? That's like a turnoff nowadays. Right. You know what I mean? Whereas like any woman with a good head on her shoulders would see that and be like, man, this guy knows what he wants. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But we're not. We're discouraged from that.
A sex culture. That's what it is. It's all about sex. Because
it's way too early to think about marriage. Right. What do you mean?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, what they don't tell you is, like for me, I always thought, I'm not the greatest of guys in that department, because it's always telling me, pornography shows you this, and then you always think, oh, you got to have like a big old monster 8-inch pecker and all this other stuff. So I'm not going to be able to satisfy her. So I need to go gain experience by banging a bunch of broads and then coming home and meeting this girl and doing that. And that was actually 100% incorrect, because I could tell you I could go this way, I could go this way, I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do every technique in the book that I learned over the 30 years, and I watched in every porn and whatever else. And it doesn't matter. No. You know what makes her get her or get her excitement and all that stuff? The mental connection. Mm-hmm. If she's not mentally connected to me, she won't even sleep with me. So,
well, the stats show that too. I mean, so the divorce rates amongst marriages where both individuals enter the marriage as virgins is around 6%. Compared to the 50% that we see in most monogamous heterosexual relationships. And what's even more interesting than that is that those married Christian couples, despite the sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s, married Christian couples are having more sex than anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Right. They're the ones that are 40, 50 years old and like, I love it. I love my husband.
Yeah. Well,
have sex like crazy. So
I can tell you, like for me personally, I got married later in life, and the funny thing is, and I think I've mentioned this before, I met my wife, and within 4 months of our first date, every date we had from the first date on was 8 hours or more. Mm-hmm. So no date was a short date for us.
Right.
And
like you spent the day with her pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
Right.
And we dated for 4 months, almost to the day, I think, before we got married. Like before we walked into the courthouse, got married. Yeah. And then, like, I want to say we got married in May. So 3 months later, we went back to Ohio and had our reception and all of this.
Right.
With all that being said, before I met my wife, I've dated women for years. I've dated women for weeks. I've dated women for hours. There's a spectrum there. And I actually remember I was engaged to be married twice before my wife. First time was a high school sweetheart, and I ended up finding out she was cheating on me with some ex-con and all this from a halfway house she worked at. Devastating for your ego, I will tell you that.
Yeah.
But, and that's kind of what drove me to go, I guess the best way of saying it is whoring around. Since my son's not here at the house anymore, I can actually speak a little clearer. But I was out whoring around. My ma used to call me a slut, all these things. And that says a lot when your own mother's calling you a slut. Literally it was, so what was the name of the girl you went on a date with? Honey? No, what was her real name? Darling, dear, sweetheart. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't ask.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I was doing because, one, I made the mistake of thinking that that one girl ended up, her opinion or her decisions
Yeah.
was a
They define you.
reflection on me.
Mhm.
And it took me years to figure out that that was a mistake on my part. And if I would have figured it out sooner, who knows? There was some girls that I dated that were probably worth marrying, you know? But because I had that mindset of, I need to go and make sure that I enjoy my life, I become who I should be, etc., etc., etc. I joined a company where I traveled around the country constantly so that I had no real home base, no real steady home life, I guess. Because
Right.
for quite a few years, it was leave on Thursday, get home on Sunday night, rest, or even get home on Monday, rest, pack, laundry, drink, party, leave again,
Yeah.
and all
Mhm.
this. I mean, that was my life for well over a decade. And, you know, in that time, I've done a lot of stuff. And if I ever finish writing my memoir for my kids to read when they're older, probably 18, where some of the stuff can be read without parent
Yeah.
supervision, that because I did some messed up
Dad.
stuff. Trust
Dad,
me.
you can't do that.
Trust me, if you read it, then you'd sit there and go, "Holy crap, you did that!" But the thing is the things that I did, I allowed that one person's decision to affect me, you know, and because of doing that for so long, I got really into drinking heavily to the point of, I would say I had an alcoholic problem. I got a DUI. I ended up not, I would drink to the point of I passed out a few times, you know, and I never really liked it very much. I knew the cure to get rid of hangovers was a shot of whiskey. I mean, all these things. I could drink till I drank so much I got used to being able to drink and get up in the morning,
Yeah.
go to work, and I might have smelled like a bar, but no one said anything because, one, they knew what I was going through. Two, they just kind of, it wasn't their place is what they thought. So over time, I got so drunk that I was dating a girl. She was staying in my house, and I went to a party down in a little town. Well, it's a little college town called Bowling Green. Got
Yeah.
schnookered.
I know what to-
Don't remember driving home. I drove home the next day. I think I was still horribly drunk because from the time I started drinking in Bowling Green, the next thing I remembered was starting to remember things when I was walking through a mall in Toledo, Ohio, where it was the Reynolds Road or Reynolds Mall. I forget what it's called now, what it was called. It's closed now. But
Did you take the 10-year-old lemons?
no,
You don't remember that movie?
I can't remember it, but I do remember
It's,
walking
Wolf of
into.
Wall Street.
I've never
Take
watched
the-
the movie.
What?
Never. I don't watch a lot of movies anymore, especially since my son's been born. It's just not happening. But
Yeah,
what I
it's hard.
do remember is walking into a jewelry store and putting down a credit app for a $10,000 wedding ring.
Yes.
The day after, when I woke up and she was talking to me about the ring, I'm like, I did what? I'm like, how the F am I going to pay $10,000 for a piece of ring? I'm like,
Yeah.
no. So we tried. We tried to see if it could work. She was a very pretty girl, but her pretty versus crazy didn't level out. And so basically,
They use the meter.
yeah, well, the problem is when you're drunk, that meter doesn't really balance out because you're pouring beer on top of it.
Yeah.
So that whole thing of allowing the mistakes that I made dictated a lot of what I did in my life. And like I said, I've done a lot of stupid stuff. And I made mistakes because allowing the fear of making that other mistake of being in a relationship where I got hurt, you know? And in all truth, that's a big driving factor for a lot of people avoiding mistakes is, am I going to get hurt? What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And now, fast forwarding quite a few years with having kids to today's world, my son, for an example, I constantly think I need to teach him to be mentally strong enough, emotionally strong enough, and physically strong enough. And because I don't want him to, if a girl breaks his heart, I don't want him to mentally break down.
We'll go down the same path,
and,
right?
Yeah, go down, do all the things I did is also part of the reason I'm trying to write my memoir when I have time to get to it and write it, all this, because I want my kids to be able to read my mistakes.
Right.
Dad, you did what? You had what pointed at you? You did this.
Yeah.
Why would you have done that? Things like this, you know, things that they can look at and say, because if you look at it in hindsight, if I would have looked at the things I did before I did them, like if I could see them play out, then I would have been like, wait a minute, no. Don't go into the drug dealer's house that just pointed a gun at you. You don't want to talk to him. Walk away. Nope. I went right in. And, you know, stupid things like that. But it comes down
joining the military. Don't do it.
Well,
don't do it.
Just don't join the Navy, you know?
No. Space Force. Join Space Force. Find yourself one base. Stay there. Ever go anywhere else. Do your 20 and get out. Get out. 20 years, get out. Do not do 22. Do not do 25. Do not do 30. Do not become an officer. Do 20 years and get out.
That's a whole nother podcast. Military advice from dads. But in fact, I think
here's the entire podcast right now. Don't join.
Don't join the military. I don't know. I think we have another guy that, if you remember who I'm talking about, might be a good person to bring on to discuss that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that I think facing our fears is a big thing we need to do. I mean, I know I just ranted on for quite a bit of time with a big backstory and all this, but what is your guys' opinion with the direction I'm going here about basically trying not to let our fears dictate how we are and teaching our kids, don't let your fears dictate your future.
Right. I mean, for me, I see the same thing. Like that's kind of where I was talking about, like, don't join the military. You know what I mean? Don't want my kids doing the same mistakes. They are going to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Obviously my kid's a daughter, so her mistakes will be slightly different, obviously, you know, but there are mistakes that she could make. One of my mistakes that I made in my life is a mistake that I wouldn't change for the world. And that is not getting married until I met my wife, because I wouldn't change it because I love my wife. You know, I wouldn't want to marry or be with anyone else, you know, so in a weird way, I look at that as God looking out for me and making sure that I found the right woman. But if I think about it also, the mistake that I made was falling for all the nonsense, going and soiling my royal oats, doing drugs and booze and partying, joining the military and acting like a fool. You know, so now it's like, now that I'm much older, married to my wife, I'm fighting, you know, to get over all of those old addictions. You know what I mean? Not that I'm really fighting so much anymore. I mean, nowadays it's like, man, whatever. You know, is I still look at boobs on the internet, but not very often. It's like very, very little. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
most of the times I go, oh sweet, so stop it, and I get off of it. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I'm able to cycle myself and be like, oh, that's stupid. You know, they're awesome. Who doesn't like big boobs? But you also have to be man enough to control yourself, and that's something that I fought. Throughout the last couple of years being married and stuff and trying to control myself in order to be married. But those things wouldn't be in play had I not fallen in depth into it when I was much, much younger, right? Um, so there's a mistake that I don't want her to make. I, I, I mean, I hope to control the situation as best as possible. Obviously, I don't want to control her 100%, but I do want to control the situation, raise her in a more Christian style home with a mother and a father, as well as in the community. One of the reasons why she goes to that private school that she goes to is they're very, very Christian, very, very classic and traditional with everything, including families and all that stuff like that. So I want her to grow up in that smaller, tight knit community, having friends for long periods of time, um, knowing her family and her friends when she gets older. Because like me, I don't have any friends.
Hmm.
I don't have any friends locally. None. You know what I mean? All of my friends were ones that joined in the military and knew in the military, knew for a few years, and then they're long gone off somewhere else, wherever they came from. All my friends from back home, where I grew up, are probably still doing drugs and working at restaurants. So who knows? You know what I mean? That's just something I don't want her to do. So that fear of following in my footsteps is something I don't want her to do. I don't want her to fall for the, I guess, I mean, I hate to bring it up, but it is what it is. Even on me is the scam of modern feminism. You know, what I mean, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Modern feminism got into me, as a young man, because that's what modern feminism does. A lot of people think modern feminism or feminism in general attack women only and brainwash women to think certain ways and stuff. And that's 100% not true. It goes for everybody. You know what I mean? Makes men think this way, makes women think this way, so they never go like this. So that is what happened, and I don't want her falling for that.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, like when I think about fear, I think about a couple. Like I like to focus on truisms, like these concepts that we can use to kind of leverage and move through life, and just like tools in the toolbox type thing, ancient wisdom. And so one thing that I think about is the idea that, some people let their fear control them so much that they never even try, right? It goes along with the idea of, it's better to have tried and failed than never tried at all. And so I think that a lot of people, fear causes paralysis, and that's no way to live life. You can't enjoy life. You can't enrich your life if you're so paralyzed to even attempt anything. And we talking about the 4 stages of manhood. I think that's, why a lot of men never make it past the second stage. It's because fear, and they just become paralyzed. The other thing that I think about is there's an old saying that says, well, I don't know, maybe I don't really know where it comes from, but I just could be making it up. But essentially it goes, you shouldn't beware, you should be aware. And I think that that's a really good thing to reference in this context as well. As fathers afraid of making mistakes, is, you shouldn't beware, you should just be aware. So don't constantly be afraid that you're going to make a mistake, but just understand that it's likely that you will make a mistake, and that if you can learn from that, or you can, perhaps prevent it, then that would be better. But you shouldn't let it paralyze you. You shouldn't let it overwhelm you emotionally, or you shouldn't beat yourself up for every little mistake you make.
Yeah.
That's just, ultimately you're hindering your progress.
Yeah.
So focused on a mistake you've made that you can't focus on doing better next time. There's just, I don't know. I guess those are the 2 things that really come to mind around this whole topic for me.
Yeah. One of the mistakes recently that I guess recently in the last like couple of years, that if connected to my kid, one of the mistakes that I used to make the most was, is disciplinary. we talked about, I was working on controlling temper and emotions and teaching her emotional intelligence. And one of the mistakes that I used to make the most was when she would have fits and tempers, I would throw fits back at her, and I would immediately yell, be quiet, stop yelling, stop screaming, stop doing that.
I did the same thing a couple weeks ago, and I know better.
Right. And she would get mad and she would sling stuff, and I would be like, stop slinging stuff, stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the ways, oddly, and
you want to see emotional instability? I'll show you emotional instability.
Right. That's exactly what I would. It was like it's like the most counterintuitive thing.
It is.
A child that is throwing a fit, thinking that that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to throw a fit in this situation when I'm angry, and then they watch you, a grown up, your parents, throw the fit. So what do they automatically connect? Oh, this is how I'm supposed to act whenever I feel this way. So it's actually 100% counterintuitive. One of the ways. So my daughter, for a long time, she's called me ooh. Who would have guessed, right? She ooh.
Didn't she say that's the Blue's Clue or something? Oh, Bluey, that's what it was.
Bluey, yeah. You ever see Bluey? And Bluey's dad plays a monkey or a gorilla called Ooh, and he acts like a gorilla, and they play a game. Well, my daughter has always thought of me, even before she watched Bluey, she used to call me a gorilla. And that's kind of where the whole idea of me being a gorilla came from.
That's kind of a realization for you, though, isn't it? Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I mean, I'm just being honest. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, it's yes. My daughter used to call, even before Bluey, she'd call me a gorilla all the time because, I mean, I'm not overly tall, but I am mildly tall. I'm 6 feet, which is fairly tall and for most average men. So I'm about a little above, just a hair bit above average, but I mean, I'm like 250 pounds, and I'm actually proud of myself because I weighed myself this morning as 235, so I dropped. I've been eating less, working out, and instead of well, most of my workouts consist of like I do 100-pound dumbbells and I do these, and I typically do about 20. And then I'll stop and I'll bend. I'll do the 100-pound dumbbells. I'll do 20 of these, and then I'll wait a second. And I'll do 20 more, and then I have a bench. I do the bench. I don't have a bench press. I just have the dumbbells, And I do the press with the dumbbells. But I mean, I have the 100-pound ones. They're big and they're heavy. And if I do anything less, it's like, what the fuck? There's nothing here. You know what I mean? So, and it seems most people probably wouldn't even think of that. So it's 100 pounds, 100 pounds. So I'm 200 pounds like this, and I do 20 times. And so the problem with that is the heavier the weight, the bigger you get, right? So my arms and my shoulders and my back and my chest and everything just getting bigger, and they get denser and harder and heavier. So I kind of like been sucking it up, and I dropped them down to 50. And I have dumbbells that have things at the end of them. You can make them different weights. Yeah, I have the two big 100-pound ones, and I have the adjustables where I can do it's like 52 to something. So I put on the 52 ones. I've been doing those and just doing the 52s, and I'll just sit there and do like 50 of them. I'll just sit there and do that, over and over and over and over, and try and get more repetitions and try and burn some of this body weight. And I've been doing sit-ups. I got a bike, where I sit and do bike. So I lost a little bit of weight, thinned out a bit, which is good. So anyways, back to the story. My bad. Off the tangent again. So one of the ways I kind of been using that ooh idea to kind of get past my own emotional things for her. So whenever she starts getting in those temper modes, I would just get down on the ground on my knees and put my arms out. And I do the hugs, hugs, like that. And man, You wouldn't believe the response. It's like a switch. It's like 100 times better. And she's like happy. She's like, okay, I love. She give me hugs and kisses like right away. You know what I mean? So that just instead of freaking out, calming myself, controlling my behavior, and thinking of something that she likes. She likes Gorilla Dad. You know what I mean? Because before I used to get on my knees, put my fist out and run around on the ground and grab her, and I would, because I can grab her and I can one arm sling her over my back and put her. So that's what I'll do. I go grab her and like that, put her on my back and then run around the house and on my knees and fists and stuff, acting like a gorilla, and she would love it. She would just play, and I would let her hold on. She'd put her arms around my neck, and I would stand up and do one of these and walk around the house, and we would play. So she's connecting that to that fun time. So, and then while I would do that, I would get her to snap out of it, and then I would talk to her in in voice. No angries. Be happy. Calm down. Angry's not okay. I'd tell her, Mom, Dad, we love you. Hugs. And then after she would calm, I love you too, Dad. And she would be like, she'd basically like calm down. And then that's when I would come out of and be like, okay, can you tell me what was the issue now? What was the problem? And then she would tell me the problem. And then that's when we would discuss it. After using the and the gorilla to calm her and get her to refocus herself, understanding that behavior kind of really isn't going to get you anywhere. I mean, so I don't know, it works. That's something that I had to learn. It was mistakes that I made, learned from my mistakes, and turned it into something better. And it seems to work. So.
That's an interesting way of dealing with it, because like me, I can't be bent over like an ape for too long or my back's going to spasm out. I mean,
oddly, it's in a weird way fitting for me.
Well, you have said that you look like a gorilla especially with your shirt off. So I'm not going to question it. Hey, my brother looks like he's wearing a sweater when he takes his shirt off in the summer too. So no judgment. But the fact is yeah, it's one of those things that, like, I've noticed, for an example, my son, when he makes a mistake or makes an error, he gets really emotional and upset. And, trying to get it calmed down is a challenge. So it sounds like a great dad hack kind of a thing, something maybe we should discuss later, but because there's a ton of dad hacks that we're definitely going to have to dive into at some point. But let's do that.
I've already started my list. We talked about it before the episode, so
perfect.
While we're talking, I'm like, oh, that's a good one.
Wait, we got to do a promotional thing here. Quick. Dad hacks coming soon from Call.
Well, let's do this. How about we end on a high note? It sounds like we all are very aware that we need to work on not allowing mistakes to be our driving factor and not allowing our mistakes to lead into our kids' life, and try to teach them not to allow their mistakes to dictate their lives. We covered a ton of things about fear of mistakes, about addressing our mistakes, about not following our mistakes, things like that. I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit, unless you guys have anything else you want to add to it, because we're all talkers. We can all used to talk forever. That's not an issue.
I do want to say, though, Tom, the flower in your ear looks wonderful.
It's from the blurring the background. It looks like you have a flower in your ear.
Like that?
Yes.
I wore that just for you.
Just for me.
Just for you.
So
What
pretty.
is it? I don't even know. I think it's one of my wife. My wife has a net in the corner
it's a
of our
teddy bear.
bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a net back here with a bunch of stuffed animals in it. And
All right.
yeah, that's I think that's I think that actually might be or wait, that yeah, I think that's a Flareon, which is a Pokemon.
Oh,
I think this thing
That's
right
funny.
here.
yes, that thing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it actually clears it up when I do this.
It does.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're off topic. Anyway.
Squirrel.
Yeah. We all have shiny object syndrome.
Yes, we do. And that's why we enjoy our conversations the way we do. With that
Anyway.
being said, let's end this for everybody else. Dom, where do people find you if they want to reach out to you or get any, because you have your merchandise, you have your X account, and so on. So
Yeah, so at Earn Her Respect is my X account. You can find all my musings there and any information about my philosophies, and then if you click the link in the bio, it'll take you to my website, Marriage Material, marriage-material.com if you'd rather search it on your own. It's we have a ton of products up there for sale. They're all focused on traditional family structures. It's very like anti-pornography. Yeah, there's a lot, the importance of fathers in the home. There's a lot of really good, it's kind of for guys that want to wear their mission on their sleeve. So, have this cup
there you go.
that we sell. It's also in the form of a sweater and a lot of other, just a lot of really cool stuff. So go check it out. We love your business. I kind of help support the mission overall. So yep, that's me.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Mr. Pancakes, Eric, what do you got?
Yeah. As usual, the pancakeswithyourdad.com. That's one of the best places to, kind of centralize where you can find me. Does have all the socials on there. You should be able to find at least all the social media links. X, Twitter, X, Twitter, whatever. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as Truth Social. Those are all great places. You can also message me on there, follow me, whatever. I'll try to follow back as well. I don't really care about the follow to follow ratio. I'm always working with everybody. But yeah, just definitely check out a lot of the merchandise on there as well. T-shirts and mugs and shenanigans, and we even have a blanket. There's a journal on there. Journals are very helpful for dads. Write stuff down, kind of get your thoughts out, stuff like that as well. I did add one or two more features. There's a link on the Pancakes with Your Dad website now to the American Liberty Foundation at the top of the website. That website is almost 100%. It's got a lot of stuff, and it will be. It'll never be 100% because we'll always be adding to it. Still waiting on the 501c paperwork from the government for the American Liberty Foundation, but a lot of that is coming soon with more information and more details. Hopefully soon rather than later. But there's some, I did update a website or information on the American Liberty Foundation website as well. There's, if you go to the contact page on there, there's a spot that says, there's a button for, what's it called? Not franchising. Why can't I think of the word right now?
Donations?
No, I can't think of the word.
I don't know.
Chaptering. There it is.
Oh.
Chaptering.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So,
Nice.
as time goes on, hopefully we'll be able to start chaptering and branching out into other states and areas and stuff like that. Maybe local colleges and schools and high schools and stuff can
That's cool, man.
have their own chapter. There is a lot of information on there. There's a whole branding guide that you can download. You can download the logos. There's even a card, business card if you want to change. You got to change the information on it, obviously, because currently it's just my information. But you can change it. You can download the card and do all that stuff. So perfect for that to actually give you the brand for when you do go and chapter. And obviously in the future, it probably won't do you any good now because obviously we don't have a 501c yet, but one day.
Sounds good. Sounds like both you guys have a lot going on. A lot of places people can find you and be able to either benefit from merchandise, benefit to donate or chapter eventually, so on and so on. So with that, callwithdads.com is where you can find all of our information here, find our shows, find our podcasts, find the videos. We're on YouTube, Rumble, about any audio player that you can think of. If we're not there, shoot me a message. Go to the contact us page, send a message, say, I don't find you on this player. I'll do my best to figure out why and how to get it on there. That way you can always listen to us. And tell a friend, subscribe, set the alerts, whatever it is that you need to do, because we have some fun conversations, as you can tell. You don't want to miss them. With that, thank you, everybody.
Podcast.
I think so too. So with that, thank you, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you later.